St. Patrick's breastplate, also known as the Dies Cry or the Lorica of Saint Patrick. A St. Patrick's hymn is a lorica, whose original Old Irish lyrics were traditionally attributed to St. Patrick during his Irish ministry in the 5th century. In 1889 it was adapted into the hymn I Bind Unto Myself Today. A number of other adaptions have been made. The prayer in Old Irish. The prayer is part of the Liber Hymnorum, a collection of hymns found in 2 manuscripts kept in Dublin and published in 1903 in the Thesaurus Pallia Hibernicus. The document gives this account of how Patrick used this prayer. Patrick sang this when an ambush was laid against his coming by Lorica, that he might not go to Tara to sow the faith. And then it appeared before those lying in ambush that they, Patrick and his monks, were wild deer with a fawn following them. The description concludes Feith Fiada Hanum, which the Thesaurus Pallia Hibernicus translates as, its name is Dies Cry. However, the phrase Feith Fiada is used elsewhere in Irish mythology to mean a mist of concealment. If the description above is accurate, then the prayer would date from the 5th century, the time of St. Patrick. However, it has been dated as from the 8th century by modern experts. Although Christian in content, it shows pre-Christian influence in that it calls for Christ's protection using the form of a pagan invocation of the gods, a lorica, shield, a breastplate. Because of this it is also known as the Lorica of Saint Patrick, or as Saint Patrick's breastplate. On the other hand, this may be a scripture reference. Specifically, Ephesians chapter 6, 10-17. God's shield to protect me from snares of devils. Summary. Each verse of the prayer begins, Atam ruag indiu, I arise today, or, I bind unto myself today, and this phrase is repeated at the beginning of most of the verses. This is followed by a list of sources of strength that the prayer calls on for support. The first verse invokes the Catholic doctrine of the Trinity. The second verse invokes Christ's baptism, death, resurrection, ascension and future return on the last day. The third verse invokes the angels, patriarchs, saints and martyrs. The fourth verse the natural world, the sun, moon, fire, lightning, etc. The fifth verse invokes various aspects of God, his wisdom, his eye, his ear, his hand. The sixth verse lists the things against which protection is required, against snares of devils, temptations of nature, those who wish ill. This list of things against which protection is required continues in the next verse: false prophets, heathens, heretics, women, druid, smiths, Goban. The next verse calls for Christ to be in all things, Christ in me, all around me, in the eye and ear and mouth of the people I meet. The last verse returns to the theme of the Trinity. The prayer in modern English translation. The following is a literal translation from the Old Irish text. Note that several different versions of the prayer can be found. For example, some render the beginning verse of each major section as, I arise today, rather than, I bind to myself today. The more problematic verses can also be found in different renderings, such as the verse, against spells of women and smiths and druids, as, against spells of witches and smiths and wizards, and Christ in the fort, Christ in the chariot seat, and Christ in the poop deck, as Christ when I lie down, Christ when I sit down, Christ when I arise. Quote. Finally, Catholic prayer cards which have popularized this prayer feature a truncated version in the interest of space. I bind unto myself today, Victorian hymn. C. F. Alexander, 1818–1895, wrote a hymn based on St. Patrick's breastplate in 1889 at the request of H. Dickinson, Dean of the Chapel Royal at Dublin Castle. Dean Dickinson wrote about this. I wrote to her suggesting that she should fill a gap in our Irish church hymnal by giving us a metrical version of Saint Patrick's Lorica, and I sent her a carefully collated copy of the best prose translations of it. Within a week she sent me that exquisitely beautiful as well as faithful version which appears in the appendix to our church hymnal. Quote, as usual, Alexander wrote the poems only. The music to the hymn was originally set in 1902 by Charles Villiers Stanford, the chorus and organ, using two traditional Irish tunes, Saint Patrick and Garton, which Stanford took from his own edition, 1895, of George Petree's collection of the ancient music of Ireland, originally 1855. This is known by its opening line, I bind unto myself today. It is currently included in the Lutheran Service Book, Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod, the English Hymnal, the Irish Church Hymnal and the Hymnal, 1982, of the U.S. Episcopal Church. It is often sung during the celebration of the Feast of St. Patrick on or near the 17th of March as well as on Trinity Sunday. In many churches it is unique among standard hymns because the variations in length and meter of verses mean that at least 3 different tunes must be used, different in the melody sung by the congregation. Musical adaptations. St. Patrick's Breastplate in the Irish Church Hymnal, 1890, by Irish composer Thomas Richard Gonsalves José, 1853–1924. St. Patrick's Breastplate, 1902, by Irish composer Charles Villiers Stanford, 1852–1924. See above. This is the best-known arrangement of this hymn. St. Patrick's Breastplate, 1912, an arrangement by Charles Villiers Stanford, 1852–1924, of his own music to C. F. Alexander's hymn, here for mixed choir, organ, brass, side drum and cymbals. St. Patrick's Breastplate, 1924, a work for mixed choir and piano by the English composer Arnold Bax, 1883–1953. Hymn of St. Patrick at Tara, 1930, a work for bass soloist, mixed choir and organ by Irish composer Dermot McMurrough, a.k.a. Harold R. White, 1872–1943. 2. A poetic interpretation by Olive Myler. St. Patrick's Hymn, 1965, by U.S. folk guitarist John Fahey, 1939–2001. On the album The Transfiguration of Blind Joe Death, Christ Be Beside Me. Also Christ Beside Me, an adaptation by James J. Quint of the tune of Benесson, published in his 1969 book New Hymns for All Seasons. The Deer's Cry, 1983, by Irish composer Sean Davey, born 1948, is based on a translation by Kuno Meyer. Arise Today, 1995, for choir and organ by U.S. composer Libby Larson, born 1950. The Deer's Cry, 2008, a choral work by Estonian composer Arvo Pärt, born 1935. Modern interpretations. Recently there has been some interest in Celtic spirituality among some Christian authors, and David Adam has written some books about Celtic prayers and spiritual exercises for modern Christians. In one of his books, The Cry of the Deer, he used the Lorica of Saint Patrick as a way to Celtic spirituality. In his seminal study, The Primal Vision, Christian Presence Amid African Religion, SCM Press, London 1963, John Vernon Taylor, later Bishop of Winchester, claimed that St. Patrick's breastplate contains all the spiritual awareness of the primal vision, and lifts it into the fullness of Christ. He concludes by quoting the whole prayer in Kuno Meyer's version, exclaiming, "Would that it were translated and sung in every tongue in Africa." John Davies, Bishop of Shrewsbury, provides a verse-by-verse commentary on the breastplate in A Song for Every Morning. Dedication and Defiance with St. Patrick's Breastplate. Norwich. Canterbury Press 2008. Based largely on experience of the struggle against apartheid in South Africa. With a foreword by Kathy Galloway, leader of the Iona community, who notes how the breastplate brings together the personal and the political in Christian discipleship. BeliefNet. Morning Prayer of Saint Patrick. The Life of Saint Patrick. I Bind Unto Myself Today, Chapter 54 of the Daily Telegraph Book of Hymns. YouTube recording of I Bind Unto Myself Today by C.F. Alexander, sung by the choir of Keble College. YouTube recording of The Deer's Cry by Arvo Part. YouTube recording of The Deer's Cry by Sean Davey, sung by Rita Connolly at the inauguration of the President of Ireland. Deer's Cry, Lorica of Saint Patrick, https www.youtube.com. Watch. V equals POW GMD WTLW.